delighted to welcome all of you here today. 2 years ago, Tal Academy was a dream. 1 year ago, we opened here in Bell Harbor with 18 students, a beautiful way for us to start. And this year, we opened with 39 students, as one of the Rebbeim pointed out, Tal. We're a school for students with language-based learning disabilities. Students who are getting lost in our yeshiva system, not for lack of trying on the part of educators like yourselves, but kids who just needed more, needed a different kind of setting to be taught differently in smaller groups in a way that they could succeed, and in a way that they could achieve the level of independence necessary to go back to their general education settings in a few years. We feel here that we have the opportunity to change the trajectory of the lives of the children in our care. To protect them from the sense of failure that plagues so many students who go from year to year not feeling successful. Baruch Hashem, we've seen our students here not only thrive academically, but start to believe in themselves again. Today's lecture, given by Dr. Soifer, is sponsored by TRC, the Tal Resource Center. Our school started with a dual mission, certainly to educate the students in our care, but also to reach out to parents and professionals and provide research-based guidance about the experience of children with language-based learning disabilities. The idea for today's seminar really came when we realized that most of our applicants were coming to us from second grade and up, and the younger applicants were generally did not fit our profile. Reflecting on this, it seemed to us that students with other types of disabilities are more likely to be identified at earlier ages than students with language-based learning disabilities. And this made sense, because when it comes to reading in particular and language development, there are some students who will maturationally need more time, and given that time, they will do fine. And this raised the question of how can we differentiate between that student who needs more time to develop versus the child who's already showing signs of a language-based learning disability, and we want to start building those skills, those language skills, as soon as possible. You don't want to lose that crucial time. So, as in all questions language related, we felt fortunate once again that we have Dr. Soifer here on our team. And without a moment's hesitation, she agreed to give the talk today. To introduce Dr. Soifer, I can read to you her long list of accomplishments. But you don't need me to do that. It's on our website, it's on the flyer. Instead, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the role Dr. Soifer plays here at Tal Academy. It's true that she is the Pied Piper of our school, and any day that she's here, you will see her with an entourage of students, of teachers, of Rebbeim following her down the hall with questions, wanting to hear a story from her. But even more than that, under Dr. Soifer's leadership, our wonderful team of language pathologists play a very crucial role here at our school. I always remind people that a child with a language-based learning disability has it 24/7, in school, on the playground, at the dinner table, with their grandparents on Shabbos. So language therapy twice a week for a half hour will never be enough for what they need to develop the language skills and the metacognitive skills that they need. But our language pathologists can collect what we thought that if our language pathologists can collaborate with our teachers, if they could be involved in our classrooms, if they could guide them in the dynamic process of developing lessons and curriculum so that every lesson is designed thoughtfully to foster language growth and metacognitive skills, that could be a powerful model. And that's what we've been able to create here at Tal Academy with Dr. Soifer's leadership, with her wisdom, with her professionalism, and as you'll see soon, with her trademark humor. It is our pleasure to share Dr. Soifer with you today.
Oh no, you have to cheer after somebody does that. We have a great deal to share and not a huge amount of time in which to share it. Just so that you know, I cannot stand still, so you're going to have to follow me, in case you didn't remember that. No, I'm not hyperactive, and no, I don't have an attention deficit disorder. But I do have to project because my colleagues are signaling me from the back of the room. And by the way, what just happened with my colleagues is important because one of the skills that we realize that some of our children don't have and need is what Mrs. Gitlin just did. She didn't say, louder, Dr. Soifer. She went, and I have to interpret that gesture. Now, if I tell a joke that she doesn't like, she's going to go. And then I'll talk with her about it later. So part of what happens here is we are endlessly communicating with each other. So what I'm going to ask you to do periodically is this. I learned a long time ago in graduate school with the most boring professor ever put on the face of the earth, that if you periodically went, he wasn't going to call on you and you could be on the beach in Marrakesh in your head. And that is one of the things I want you to be alert to as I go through all these details. I will be watching you. Because what I want to see is, and then if we have time I'll say, what's his name? Tell me about her. Let me make that clear. Because we are endlessly communicating and the purpose of language is for communication. So learning to watch them, it's not just the words you say, it's how you say them and the accompanying gestures. It's how I read your face. So we're going to talk today about this notion of he'll outgrow it, which is a guaranteed way to irritate Dr. Soifer. All right, let me tell you this story. This is an image that I want you to hold on to. You see the date? 2006. 2006. I'm going to tell you a quick story. Some of you may have heard it before. But this concept of who is this child is something with which I want you to return to school. So when you look at Sarah, she's making you go like this, put this image in your head. Which one of these circles is pulsing? What's going on here? So every one of us has an inherent neurology. Born this way. It's the way we're wired. Right? And then we have certain temperaments and particular personality styles. I say this many times. I am the mother of fraternal twin sons who, thank you so very much, are and always have been the best of friends. They do not share a common trait. Physically, they don't look related. And by personality, two boys could not be more different. Please note that I will often refer to them as the boys because they're so fraternal. They were never the twins. They're always the boys. And the boys now have some gray hair and are about to be 34 years old, but it's just a family thing, all right? The difference is, if I look at my son, Russ, you'll say, what? I'm sorry. And if I look at my son, Josh, he'll look back at me. The other one, we'll assume he did. So the temperamental and personality styles are important. And then there are all of these circles. What is this child's overall intellectual ability? But how does he use his cognitive ability? Because I've known kids with modest IQs who use every bit of it, and some really bright kids who can't access it. And then, yes, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, 3 forms. Mixed, inattentive, and hyperactive. The hyperactive kid is easy discussion about this. You can't sit still. Nothing you do is going to keep them what? Still. But you see an attentive one, then you have to keep an eye on it. Or, yes, sir. Louder, thank you. And keep letting me know that. Are you back there in the chief seats? You can't hear me? Maybe just okay. Thank you. Maybe. Let me move the podium forward. Let me know if that helps. So if you have an attention deficit, it's going to disrupt your executive functions. But this is what I want to attune you to. The hyperactive kiddo is easy to spot. It's the inattentive one. Oh, what? Who isn't disruptive, is not as easy to spot. And then disruptive executive functions. Your executive functions are the boss of your brain. They sort of direct and organize and help your mind know what it has to do. That is the briefest, cheapest definition of executive functions you will ever hear. Come again when I do the presentation on executive functions for 2 hours. And then there's your working memory. Here's the way to think about it. Your working memory is your brain's post-it note. You write little notes to yourself to remember. You should see my desk. It's covered with little post-it notes. But here's what to keep in mind. There are post-it notes this big, and there are post-it notes this big. Your working memory allows you to do what my colleague here is doing. I am speaking faster than she can write, so she is relying on her working memory, holding my words in her head while she writes them. So keep that in mind. And then there's the emotional functioning that goes to how children react. What is the range of their emotional response? How do they respond in different circumstances? And who are they emotionally? And then there's, language. What is the nature of the language system that this child has? And how is he being taught academically? And then sensory motor. I don't know about you, but control tops are not my idea of fun. They're very uncomfortable. And imagine a kid for whom tags are uncomfortable. This image was created about a little boy whose parents were told that he was intellectually limited, emotionally disturbed, learning disabled, language impaired, and had an attention deficit disorder. He was 7 or 8. And the mother said, you public school folks don't have it right. So he was brought to our office. We did an evaluation of him. And this is what emerged, because this little boy was indeed ADHD. He was indeed language impaired. But he was not intellectually limited. He was not emotionally disturbed. He was very learning disabled, and he had made a decision by personality type that he would rather look like a tough, bad kid, than look stupid. So he was a bad boy in school. And those teachers did not have a clue what to do with him. We got him into a special school. He never had a teacher he ever trusted. It took him 6 months to talk to a teacher. All right. And here's the end of the story. He not only graduated from high school, this mentally incompetent, learning disabled, emotionally disturbed, blah, 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 little boy, but his first year of college, he was very upset. You know why? Because his GPA was 3.8, and he wanted a 4.0. So I want you to keep this in mind, because I'm going to be focusing largely on the language part of things. But I want you, any kid who's making you go, I want you to think, who is this child? Who is this child? And just think of my twins. Yemma versus Homo, sorry. So keep this in mind, because this is the foundation of the work that we do here. So each of us is looking at each kid and saying, how do I have to approach her? Because she's different than she is. And how can I teach her the way she can learn? Now, so the whole idea here is, he'll outgrow it, when? All right, because in my career, which is remarkable that given the fact that I will be 29 years old in May, just send presents or cards. My career is now in excess of 50 years, and I have seen exactly 2 children of the tens of thousands that I have, with whom I've been involved, whose mothers I said to him, don't worry. Mom called, described kid to me. I said, this is what I want you to watch for in the next 2 months. Call me back. She did. Now watch for this. Call me back in 2 months. She did. And after 6 months, I said, go. It's fine. 2 kids. Twice. The parents always have some sense. What we're trying to do is give you professional sense. Most don't outgrow it. Now, I have been a member of the faculty of the Albert Einstein College of Medicine for many, many, many years, which is very, very fortunate. When I was a girl, I wanted desperately to be a pediatrician and go to the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. My grandmother, let her rest in peace, said to me, Mama, marry a Jewish doctor, don't be a Jewish doctor. You don't want debt. They had a depression mentality. So when I got an appointment in the Department of Pediatrics at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, I knew that my prayers had been answered. One of my responsibilities is to train pediatricians. All right? And when I meet with them in small groups, which is one of my tasks, the residents, I always have their names and I have their email addresses. And what I say to them is, if I ever find out that you told somebody's parents, don't worry, she'll outgrow it, and you don't tell those parents what it is and when it will be outgrown, I have your name. I will find you. Because the pediatricians are not always trained properly. They are trained in well baby care, not in child development. And you know what else? You know what else is important? If in fact, I said, Faggy has delayed language development, and let's provide her with language therapy, and it turns out, for once in my life I was wrong, and her language skills burst open, you will waste more time and more money on junk that the kids don't use than you will on the therapy. All right? Keep that in mind. That kind of intervention with a language pathologist, with an OT, with a PT, with any interventions makes more difference for that kid. And it's not a bad thing. You'll waste more money on junk. Well, he didn't need it. Yeah, he didn't need it, but it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt. So I want you to work with me to conceptualize. How am I doing back there?
Every new slide, start projecting again.
I'm sorry?
Every new slide, start projecting again.
Thank you, sir. Sarah is taller than I am, ergo I obey her. That's what I say to the children. Okay. And one of the techniques that I have used assiduously with all of the children is this. I always come to a child's eye level. It makes a world of difference in your communication with that youngster. So let's take a look at this idea of language. And I want you, I'm going to give you a quick version of it. I want you to listen to me very carefully. Among us in this room, there are language pathologists. All combined have more than 100 years of experience. The bulk of that is mine, because I'm the point is that in my career, and I'll bet in theirs, they have not met a child who had an expressive but not a receptive disorder. I don't refer to expressive and receptive. I talk about production and comprehension. The concept of an expressive language disorder versus a receptive language disorder is part of the function of testing. We are testing what the kid can understand. We are testing what the kid can say or communicate. But when you're looking at this image, you see that language is an integrated system. It's a dynamic system, the purpose of which is for communication, and it is rule-governed. And we have to learn those rules early on. So language, you heard Mrs. Tayyib introducing me, you heard her refer to my colleagues as language pathologists, not speech therapists, because speech is a part of language. So when we're looking at the language system, we're looking at language content, all the words we know, and what we know about them. So yes, it's vocabulary, but it's also what you know about those words, so that you know when to use them and when not to use them. And that there are different levels of words. If you have any access to YouTube or to, what is that other thing that with an M? See, this thing is called word finding difficulties, all right? Where I can't find the word that I want. And by the way, that is never supposed to happen to children. Ever. Ever. All right? So if you go on YouTube, what you might see is little kids saying things that you would not believe are coming out of the mouth of an 18-month-old. You know why? Because they heard it in the house. So when we are talking to children, they are acquiring information. They are acquiring the meaning of the words, the ways in which the words are used, and the sounds that are used for them, and the order of the words that you have to use. I'm not stopping to think about sentence structure, but little kids are learning it. When I write, I have to think about sentence structure. So I want you to think about the idea of content, everything you know, use, all the reasons you use that information interactively, and then form. How many of you are from Brooklyn? Yeah, me too. So when I was growing up, I talked like this. Could you imagine being a speech communication disorders major and sounding like this? I didn't really. It was my former mother-in-law sounded this way. But in any event, the fact of the matter is that's speech. Now I can do this for you in an accent français. You look again very sophisticated. This is my speech pattern. But you see, the content, the words I'm using, and my intent to communicate are the same, even though the speech is not clear. But you know what speech becomes important for? Is all of this leads to reading and writing. All of these sounds become letters. All of these sentences, these pauses become punctuation. So oral language is the foundation of literacy. So we have language content, everything we know, and by the way, that's from how to make bagel and cream cheese and lox to how to learn history, because it's all language-based. Language use, for example, allow me to introduce myself. So nice to see you again, Mrs. Hannafin. Just this morning, your son threw something at me, and I threw it right back at him. I'm not. We were laughing together. Now, do I obviously know this woman? Yes. All right. Now watch. No, I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to land on my head if I do. How do you do? I'm Lydia Soifer. You are? Nice, so very nice to meet you. Do you hear the difference in the manner and the tone? Because I know Mrs. Honigman, and yes, he was given permission to throw it at me. This is more formal. This is more formal. I would not say, so Tara, how you doing? I wouldn't, but I might say, Mrs. Honigman, how you doing? It's nice to see you again. Knowing what to say to whom, how, under what circumstances. So it's not just the words that you choose, it's how you put them together and why you use them now. And you want to watch for that in the kids who cannot always find the words, who get frustrated and angry instantly, and break people's telephone. Because they don't know how to say, you really shouldn't throw the ball at me so hard. So instead, I do something back. Because when you can't find the words, you can always find So you want to be alert to what is going on communicatively. So we have the language, the sounds, the words, the sentences. We have all of the words we know. And the word I want you to listen for, there are 2 words I want you to listen for, because they are red flag words. Are you ready? Thing and stuff. Those are red flag words. You know what? Excuse me, lady over there with like mine, who have this color, only they're like the same color as your sweater. Yeah, you. What sentence was that? Can I have that thing over there next to the other stuff? And if I'm pointing, there's a context, she's going to look at me and say, you want the water bottle? Listen for that. That's a red flag. That's a red flag. All right? So we have the sounds, the words, the sentences, the vocabulary, all the ideas that we have, and when we use them. The speech is the clarity that takes a while to develop, but becomes part of the foundation of writing and spelling and decoding. And then all the different reasons for which we communicate with each other. So then what I want you to keep in mind here is that, watch me everybody, oral, A-U-R-A-L, oral, to the ear, and oral, O-R-A-L, language, are the foundations of all literacy. So that's why we're watching for it as early as we can. I'm telling you, language grows very, very, very fast. Before you know it, a youngster could be playing catch-up baseball. We used to believe, until science led us to something new, that babies start learning to read the minute they hit the air. Okay? Because you learn to read with your ears when you realize that you're not, you have to collect the sounds. The research now in this amazing world of science says that babies start learning to read, are you ready?
In utero.
In utero. All right? Because part of what you need, listen to the difference, for the infant communities. For the infant communities, part of what you're hearing are those intonation patterns that make questions, that are commands, that are sentences with a period, that comes, and the babies are already picking up those vibrations in utero. All right? People have often said to me, why are you talking to that baby? And I always say, she doesn't understand. And I always smile and say, I'm teaching her to read. And they look at me like I'm nuts, but I'm right. I may be nuts, but I'm right. All right? So take a look. Let's take a look at how early on. It's not when they start talking. Part of the reason that they don't talk is they don't have the motor control. That doesn't mean they're not hearing. It doesn't mean that they're not understanding. It doesn't mean that they're not taking information in. I was in a restaurant recently. My children tease me very, very badly. That we'll be walking or sitting somewhere and they'll say, Mom, there's a baby there, you missed him. Mom, there's a kid over there, you missed him. I can't help myself. Of course, that's because they haven't produced grandchildren, but we're not Now, I am always watching. Here we were out for lunch the other day, and there was a woman sitting with a 3-month-old who was perhaps the most alert baby I have seen since I can't remember when. That baby was yes, he had gorgeous cheeks, I get that, but it was more how he was cocking his head and listening and reacting. So we started to talk more loudly and deliberately and watched him respond. Oh, I hear you. I wonder what that means. Now, is he thinking that in his head? No. But he is having an emotional and somewhat of a cognitive response. Talk to them early on. Let's start at the beginning, from birth, from birth having started even before they're in utero. I want you to take a look at this. You do not need me to read this to you. But I want you to be aware of just how much we can monitor and how quickly you recognize how the babies are communicating. Different cries when they're hungry. You know when they're hungry versus when something hurts. You can hear the difference in the cry. And you can also, when the cooing has different intonation. Very early on. What you want to watch for is that you've got sort of a flat sounding pattern. There isn't much variety for those of you who have infants. And I will tell you that, and I tell this often, my twins wore breech, one on top of the other. It appeared that a torpedo had been swallowed. Tushy tushy. All right? C-section, baby one is delivered. Doctor turns back and says, oh no. Can you imagine? So we watched that baby like mad. Like mad. And I was watching for all of this. And you know what said baby had? A hearing loss. As a result. But he was dealt with early on, because we were able to look at all of what is developmentally wrong. So begin to look. Now, part of the reason, what we know, some of the literature says, you say mama, you say mama, how's that? Mama, okay. Kids, if you are nursing versus bottle fed, will say mama versus dada, because of the different use of muscles for the suckling action. Right? They don't have motor control. This little 3-month-old we saw the other day was already chuckling with pleasure. He was just laughing at us. So take a careful look at this. Look under 6 to 8 months. The 5th bullet down uses facial expressions to convey meaning. Already communicating with it. So I don't know how many of you are dealing with little ones like this, but I want you to see just how early on. Keep on coming. Now, when my boys were 17 months old, I stopped counting their words. The rule in our family was, Lydia, do not save money for college, save money for psychiatry. You are making these children crazy. But I had one with a hearing loss, and we were watching super duper hard. Look at all that is expected. This is a huge amount. Take a careful look. Read. I don't like being read to when I know you can read. Take a careful look at that. Because what we're watching for is understanding as well as production. One of my favorite activities with little kids is asking to see their belly button. Because I want to know if they know where their belly button is. I can see your nose. Where are your ears? I can see your ears. Where's your belly button? All right. So we play body parts games because they're supposed to know this. Look at the different kinds of activities. Peekaboo is international. Babies everywhere play that game. But I want you to recognize how much they know before they can talk. They know a lot. A lot. And what you want to watch for is their comprehension, not their receptive language, but their comprehension, their understanding of what is said, of what is happening around them, because they don't yet have the ability to say as much as they are going to say. And we watch for these early warning signs when the babies are not responsive, not understanding. All right? So there's a little bit, you will have been given a checklist, but here's another version of it in detail. And if this little one is making you nervous, just watch, and watch for these behaviors and see what you can do to facilitate them. because I don't know how many people live in their house. I don't know how much time parents have with them, but you have time, and see if you can facilitate language growth. All right. Now watch. Pragmatics, the language use. Look at all they do. Look at all they can do. By the time they're between 6 and 9 months old, they exchange smiles, they wave, they'll call you. By the time they're almost a year old, they'll make a face, they'll reject an activity that they don't want to be doing. You are watching for these communication behaviors. If that camera was not staring at me, I would be interacting with you and demonstrating all of this. And poor Mrs. Honickman does not want me to keep using her as an example. All right? But I want you, take a look at 12 to 15 months. Have you ever had a conversation with someone who talks, I won't call TMI, too much information, on and on and on and on. Look how old they are. Barely a year when they start learning to take turns. All right? So I want you to take a look at this and use it as a way of monitoring anybody who's making you go. All right? And then, this is where we start expecting the kids to have language skills. But what I'm telling you is they are acquiring language skills which are the foundation of literacy from the moment they are born. And if you talk to Dr. Gabb at Harvard, she'll say in utero. So now most of the kids come to nursery school around this age. Am I correct? They start getting to nursery school in the 3 to 5. And so we start here. Aren't those children gorgeous? Look at those children. Those are my twins. Those infants were my twins, and you will see the pattern. And if anybody tells them, I will find you. They have no idea that I do this. Now, look at them. Look at the volume. Understands 300 words. Is already using 50. Mine, we stopped counting when they hit 100 at 17 months. But that's to whom they were born, all right? So what now, we're getting less of, give me, phony, more phony. Now you're getting more words coming out along with the gestures. And they want to hear the stories more and more and more. Begins to use verbs. Now, do any of you have trouble sleeping? Oh, how lucky you are. You do. I've got something for you. A dissertation was written several decades ago on the use of do and go. Do, go, make, and get are what are called not proverbs, proverbs. They stand in for virtually every action. And I helped create one of the first preschool special ed nurseries in Westchester County. And one of the patterns that I saw is those special ed kids relied on do and go and make and get instead of eat and run and build and find. More specific verbs. So, if you can't sleep, I'll bring you my dissertation, because that was what I studied, this is an early identifier for kids. Those are red flags when you hear do, go, make, because they don't have better vocabulary, or they can't find. Watch, stands in for everything. She's doing that, and she's doing that, and she's doing that. She's staring, she's writing, she's nodding, but she's doing that. There's, watch for it. So what you want to do, and this is when we start to watch at 24 months, because this becomes literacy related. And you can read all of this, but I want you to have this. And no, let's not be cash about it. And join in songs, because songs and rhymes are crucial precursors to decoding. Those rhymes make a big, big difference. And remembering the words. Too many of the children that came to us could not read their own prayers. They had memorized the rhythm patterns. so that they sounded, so that they sounded like the others and faded. And we alert to what is called the halo effect. The really good-looking kid, the really charming, sweet, attractive child who smiles and nods and doesn't cause trouble can often be overlooked. Now, take a look at the 2- and 3-year-olds. Look at how the volume of information is growing. Just look at what they know, what they can do. If you're still able to count the words, they don't have enough. All right? That makes a big deal. And here, watch this. Hi, Mrs. Taib. Hi. How are you?
I'm good.
It's cold.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I don't like cold. Watch the difference. Hi, Mrs. Taib. How are you? It's cold outside today, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah. Virtually the same conversation, 2 different deliveries. Eye contact, facial gesture, responsiveness to a person's response to you. Well, he takes turns. Yeah, he takes turns, but he's not looking at me. Did you hear the intonation? I want you to get a sense of what is and is not legitimate. And many times, what you saw me do to this lady over here, whose phone I hope I did not break, is children act out because they can't communicate. All right? Of course.
How do you differentiate when a child's not making eye contact because it's a language delay versus like that anxiety, shame of eye contact?
We were going to take the questions at the end, but I know her, so I'm going to take them. Oh, you know what, Sarah? I'm really tired. How are you feeling? Yeah, what you see me doing, Mrs. Honeycom's given name is Sarah. Is it Sarah? Sarah. I deliberately didn't make eye contact. Because when you make eye contact with somebody, it shines the spotlight on her. There goes her blood pressure. And when you're doing it with a little pizzolo, a little one, who is anxious, that doesn't help. Eye level, talk about how you feel. Don't ask questions, because we do that all the time. I'm so hungry. I'm trying to think on what I want to eat. I don't know. I like pizza, but we had it yesterday. Do you have the pizza? That's a deliberate yes or no question. So you see, you have to know who your customer is. What I did with Mrs. Taib versus what I did with Mrs. Honickman is vastly different. Did you hear all of my intonation patterns? Did you sense an engagement with her as opposed to, I'm supposed to talk to this lady and be polite? You're looking for the kind of engagement. And the last thing in the world you ever want to say to a kid is, look at me. Unless that kid's done something dreadful, and then you're up. But in general, look at me. Now, think of what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. I could have stood here for 2 hours and read these slides to you. Between age 2 and 3 years, children understand over 500 words, and they use 500 words. They're intelligible half to 3/4 of the time. Wouldn't that have been fascinating? You'd be bored and irritated. I'm not doing that. I'm attempting to communicate with you. And I watch you nod, and I know I've mentioned somebody that matters to you. I want you to be engaged and involved and think about kids. So there's different communication styles that you have to engage in. Years and years ago, this would never ever happen now. But all my teasing about age aside, when I was getting a master's degree in communication disorders, we were sent out into the community in wheelchairs so that we could experience what it was like to be a person who was wheelchair bound. We were sent out into the community to stutter so we understood affectively what it was like to have people look at you. And you know what I learned from that wheelchair experience? Because I was one of the people who worked in rehab with children who had cerebral palsy and were bound to wheelchairs. I learned to talk to children at eye level. So when I'm working with the kids, and sometimes if you could visit us at school, you'd have a very good laugh to watch. These knees ain't what they used to be. To watch the children help Dr. Soifer get up off the floor after morning meeting. Thank you, Akiva. And so, eye level, but not necessarily eye contact, and make it about you. That takes the spotlight off her. And then, you know, I've had to learn here who can be touched and when, and sometimes just a gentle, you know, makes a difference. It communicates a message. So I want you to take a look at all of this information. Now, 3 to 4 years of age, look at the difference. Look how much we expect of them. But the one I want you to look at is in the second column. Can tell a story. Can speak about events in the recent past, not always in the present tense. They can tell you what they did. And look at the different kind of spatial understanding, time understanding. The only way to do this effectively and successfully is to tape record. If you have questions about this little girl, this will teach you to sit in the front. Okay? If you have questions, about little Faggy, what you do is, what happens is you just record. You know why? Because they're always going to talk for the most part faster than you can write. If they can't talk faster than you can write, that's a problem. All right? And then you get to listen to the pattern, because you know what happens? What is your name?
Pasha.
Pasha, can I have that thing? And you, as a teacher, will say, which thing, sweetheart? That? Oh, you mean the bottle? And not even realize that the kid has not said bottle. All right? So you know what, Rookie? I went there, and all the ones from my class, they were there too. And we had so much good time. It was wow. I would go to that place again. And you should go there too, because it's the wow. Speech is perfectly clear. Where did I go and what did I do? And then Rookie, being the good language pathologist and superb parent that she is, will say to me, who did you go with? What did you do? Tell me one thing you did. Who took you? Where was it? So that you are then getting the who, the what, the where, the when, and you can say, oh, you went to Disneyland with Bubby and Zadie? And you went on the big ride? Yeah, that's what I told you. These are techniques of good language ear professionals. And that's what Mrs. Teddy was talking about. For years I've taught graduate school. And one of the things that has always been frustrating is all the special ed teachers have to take one course called Speech and Language Disorders Related to Learning Disabilities. And then they have all these language impaired kids in their classes with different responses to who is this child. Here, my colleagues and I interact collaboratively with each other so that, and initially it was interesting because I can't teach the Parsha, but I can teach you how to teach the Parsha. And that's what we've been doing here. That's what makes a difference. You have to listen to yourself on the recording, what are you doing, and you have to listen to the kids. Was that all? Thank you for warning me that I need to talk faster and less. Okay, so here you have, she's so gracious, my colleague. About whom am I speaking? Mrs. Caillou. But if in fact your comprehension is not good, who's that? She is so gracious. Yeah, which one? Because they don't know that I can make the connection between Mrs. Caillou's gesture and her awareness of my long-windedness and how graciously she is helping me monitor. But the kids, you have to, you all knew what that was. So take a look at these lists. All right? So what we know is that you now have those checklists, and you've been sent home with a wonderful, wonderful handout. I deliberately put all of that in there for you to realize just how much they know and how much language they can use, and what will happen to you. We have your names if you tell somebody's parents, oh, don't worry, she'll outgrow it. I've seen it before. We have your names. So what we want you to take a look at is language development, speech clarity, communication skills. Yes, but preschool learning is also about play. And we watch how the children play, because that is a big, big deal. Because play is measurable. And I will tell you a brief tidbit about something I learned from a developmental pediatrician years and years ago that has made a world of difference. The late Dr. Lawrence Taft used to take us on rounds with him, and we would come out into the waiting room, and this is what Larry would do. He'd stand behind the pillar in the waiting room of the Kennedy Center, and we would think it was peculiar, and he would just watch the child interacting with other kids, with his parents, or playing. And you know what? In all of his years, and because of what he taught me in all of my career, I've never encountered, nor did Dr. Taft, a child who would not talk to me. You know why? Because what he taught us to do was never mind that she's 5 years and 7 months old. She's playing like a 3-year-old. Ergo, I will address her at her level of understanding and not be over her head, not frighten or confuse her, because your level of play is symbolic of what your understanding is. And I have had parents say to me, what are you doing, Dr. Soifer? I've never heard him talk that way to anybody. Why? Because I'm talking to him at his level, not at his age. So monitor their play. And nursery school is also learning about how to be with other kids, turn taking, all of which is language mediated. All of school is language based. All of school is language based. No matter what you do, language is the vehicle that drives the curriculum. So there, we are learning to read in the early years, and then we learn from reading. Oral language is the foundation of all literacy. English is a royal pain in the neck. There are 26 letters, but many, 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 many more sounds, unlike Spanish or Hebrew. There are 6 different ways to spell the sound of the letter A. All right. How many different ways can you pronounce CH? Chair. My children live in Chicago, and because of the acoustics in this room, there's a bit of an echo. So the sounds become letters, but there aren't enough letters to represent all the sounds. And the letters then combine become words, and this is important. Watch for their comprehension. Understanding what you hear means you're collecting background information, vocabulary knowledge, and that becomes understanding what you read. And similarly, saying what you mean becomes writing what you intended. And we don't write the same way we speak. We have a different voice. Here are things that I want you to take careful note of in anybody who's making your head scratch. Alphabet knowledge, do they recognize the letters of the alphabet? But we'll talk about that in a minute. Do they understand? May I borrow this, Mrs. Huntington? This is a very famous story by Dr. Marion Blank. All right, Dr. Blank was a developmental psychologist who told this hilarious story, Concepts of Print. You ready? Her grandson was somewhere between 2 and 3, and she came in and saw him. See what I've done? Reading, supposedly reading this book that was over his head. And she said to him, "Sweetheart, your book is upside down." He looked, to which he said, "I can't find my glasses, Grandma." The point is, we know that we go from left to right. Our population has to learn in 2 directions. Concepts about print. I've seen children read words without punctuation right across. It tells me they're not understanding. Phonological awareness starts early on. Sound awareness. That's why I said keep your eye out for those who can't rhyme. And the quality of oral language. This is a repeat of what has been said before. Narrative is storytelling, vocabulary, the words you know and what you know about them, sentence structure, and your problem solving and thinking skills. And one of the reasons I make a big to-do about word finding difficulties is, yes, they are driving me crazy, but also the ability, this is called RAN, Rapid Automatic Naming, is an early indicator of children who will have dyslexia. Being able to rapidly name colors, rapidly name pictures. If you can't do that, it's going to be real hard to remember the sound of the letter P. Now, did you hear the one about the pigeon, ladies? Here's the one about the pigeon. This was told to me by my colleague, the late Eleanor Jedrzejczyk, who studied with Jean Piaget himself. And one of the behaviors that used to frustrate Dr. Jedrzejczyk was this. "Oh, no, he knows the alphabet. He can say the whole thing." All right. Can he say it or can he sing it? Yeah. All right. You know what Eleanor used to say? In her incredibly complex accent, the woman spoke 7 languages. "If you give me enough time, you give me enough birdseed, I'm going to teach a pigeon the alphabet." You know why? Because the letters don't change. You don't read the letters, you read the sounds that they represent. So when you look at B-A-G, you don't say B-A-G, you say bag. Because the B represents not ba, but b. Keep that in mind. I don't care if they recite the alphabet. And if they do, I wait to hear if they're singing M-N-N-O-P. Keep this in mind. This is an important mathematical equation. Decoding, reading, saying what the word says, looking at the letters, and pronouncing it, plus understanding what it means. That's reading. A kid who can decode, say the words that he sees on the page, can fool you for a long, long, long time. And nothing makes me crazier than seeing that, because they can get all the way to the 3rd and the 4th grade and not have a clue. But say the words melodious with intonation. And you know how I know I'm right? Because at least 2 people at every one of these tables is going. All right. So what I want you to do is, now I've given you a huge amount of information about what is normal development, what is typical, except in your child, because your child is smarter than everybody else's, but typically development. Now let's develop diagnostic bias. No kid, this is the circle language content, all about the words you know and what you know about them. No child should have word finding difficulties. Thing, stuff. Those are flaming red flags.
Let's become a slave for kids, that they'll say, basically, when they're starting a sentence or something, they become a slave that then they just get used to that speech pattern, whereas those kids wouldn't necessarily have to live it, they hear it on other friends.
Can't hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to stand and turn and speak to them. Join me in the discomfort of talking to a large group.
Sometimes kids develop slang from peers that they'll say basically before they start a sentence, or like, and all those type of things. Not necessarily do they have a delay, but they get used to these speech patterns.
Right.
So I'm saying when someone says stuff and thing, they're also picking it up from
There's a
from
volume.
conversation.
A volume of stuff in this thing, right? And if the kid cannot come up with that word, what stuff are you talking about? Tell me what stuff, what thing. You want to listen to it as a pattern. That to me gives me like a little shot in my ear. And then I start listening for how often, under what circumstances. And you can count how many times a day do I hear Yehuda say stuff. And under what circumstances. It's one thing if Yehuda is yakking with Eitan, but it's another thing if Yehuda is asking a question. It's another thing if Yehuda is answering a question. So it's the context. It's the context. There's different ways to use language. I want you to listen to that. And again, here's an appropriate, all right, here's a list of things to watch for. Inappropriate use of words. Ready? I asked a fellow why he liked to go to his particular sleepaway camp. And you ready? He was 12, and his answer was, it's great. You know why? Because you get to decision every day what you're going to do. So the meaning is legit, but I beg your pardon? All right. And by the way, once they are 7, if you hear the past tense come out as kisted, ouch. That hurts my ear as well. All right? And where it says narrow, more concrete meanings for word. You know, think of this. Watch this. This is called the semantic continuum. Worried, upset, concerned, distraught. All right? So which word is the kid using? You know, what is your name? Daniela. I'm sorry? Daniela. Daniela was very upset because Danielle, all right, and she comes to me and says, I was distorted. You were what? I was distorted because Danielle took my toy. Oh. That tells me she heard that word somewhere. She hasn't a blessed clue. Are you angry that Danielle took your toy? Yes, I'm angry. So you want to hear that the words are being used appropriately. I'm the first person in my family who graduated from college, and my grandfather, let him rest in peace, used to tease me and say, so think about the timing. So what's that, one of your 50-cent words? Because I would use a word that we didn't use at the dinner table. You want to be alert. Yes?
Okay, so...
Loud! They're telling me loud!
I have loud voice. As a preschool director, we often have assistants in our classroom, and I'm sure other people do too, who don't have the best language, communication skills, because English is not their first language. Are we doing a good service to our young children? Because they're wonderful assistants, but their English is not their first language, and often correcting the syntax or the sentence structure. And if you're 45 years old and you're struggling with language, it's not going to go away.
There's a cost-benefit analysis here, all right, so that you have to make. This is a fine young woman who understands children's needs, has wonderful patience, all right, is engaging and creative and dynamic. But I did not have her work with anyone, any child about whom you had a question. Because that kiddo needs good language delivered to him. That doesn't mean that she can't be helpful, but if I'm worried about Faggy, I need her to hear and have represented to her the best quality language possible. Because if Faggy says to me, I don't got none of that, all right, I need someone who can say, no, you don't have any cookies. Not someone who's going to say, no cookies is there. I'm not mocking her. That's a very big difference for this kid. So there's the answer to your question. All right. Being able to categorize is an important skill. Grouping similar things together. All right. So I'm trying to pace things. Now, common symptoms of language problems. There's a point at which, you ready? Watch this. Yehuda, I'm being happy of the camera on my face because I put on lots of goods on the part where is my teeth. All right? That's immature grammar, especially for a 29-year-old. And so what you want to listen to is what is the nature of the grammar that the children are using. Because by the time they're 4 and 5, go back a few slides, they're talking in complex sentences. And later on, remember that working memory piece? All right. The young man who was in charge of the camera is well known to us at TAL because he trained some of the boys in photography. That's one grammatically complete, nastily complex sentence. And it may just be too much for the kids to process. Yes?
I have a question about expectations for kids who don't speak English at home. Is there a difference in our expectations and their developmental language?
Yes. Yes. If you send me an email, I will send you some resources on bilingualism. That's a whole other story. That said, my great-nephew is living in a household where English and Spanish are spoken. And guess what? He speaks both. So if a kid is having trouble learning language, being in a bilingual environment puts an extra burden on him. But who is this child? And he's part of this family. And if everybody around him is speaking Hebrew, but he can't, it's not good. All right? And then take a look at language use. They just talk about the same thing over and over and over again. Because that's the topics with which they're most comfortable. They don't introduce, they start talking. Hey, Sarah, can I tell you what I got for my birthday? You know what I got for my birthday? It was just my birthday, I got a lot of presents. As opposed to, so it was big and it came in a very big box and it had 4,000 pieces in it, and I got to get the big table out so I could make it all up. See the difference between the first few and that one? And my speech is clear. But Sarah's going, what did you get, honey? What was in the box? There's a big difference. And I have heard kids, I wish I could tell you this joke, but we're in a synagogue. I have had kids come to me who have heard things in school, known that you're probably not supposed to say that, but weren't sure, and come and tell me a dirty joke. All right? The kid knew to laugh, but he didn't know what the joke meant. But he knew not to ask his mother, do they get the joke? All right? Do they get the joke? Can they shift from everyday language into academic language? Remember, there's a big difference. In school, teachers ask questions to which they know the answers. That's not true on the playground. So you have to have different registers. All right? And you saw me fail to adapt to Mrs. Taib's needs. You make eye contact with somebody when you talk to them. So who do I want to talk to now? I'm well. How are you? Oh, good. Now watch this. Watch it go straight to the devil. What's your name?
Aviva.
Aviva. I have a very dear friend named Aviva. All right? I don't, excuse me, I'm going to move you a curse because I want to torment Aviva by purpose of demonstration. At what point will I become too close to Aviva? I'm getting there. And so my friend Aviva now lives in Florida, but so I don't get to see her very often. And here's the other one. Here's the other one. Where? I can touch it either here. I can touch it either here. I can't touch it either here. Do the children know that? That's part of communication. And when they do, and they'll come up to you and say, "What's that you got on your face?" You don't do that when you're 5. That's telling you that they don't have the language use, social dynamic, impulse control. Or they're not well raised. Somebody's going to say that. That may be possible too. But these are all little flags. These are all little flags. I see it here. I come from a different background. I expect when I see a kid and I say good morning, that they're going to say good morning back to me. And every one of these children has steadily learned. You don't walk past Dr. Soifer in the hall without saying good morning, or she will follow you down the hall until you do. What are the social dynamics of the situation? All right? So determining and adapting to the listener's needs. Take a careful look at this. You have this as a handout. It's a gift to you. Here's your checklist. You can get them when they are young, and we want to, all right? Because the expectations are lower. And I'm always thinking about their literacy and social skills down the pipe. Jean Chol was brilliant. We spend the first 3 years of school, learning to read. And the rest of the time, we are reading to learn. And we have got to develop these skills early on. Oral language is the foundation of literacy. In your population, we are looking for the early warning signs of what is going to become an academic learning disability. They can manage in the playground. They can manage at the Shabbos table. What are they going to be able to manage in the 2nd and 3rd and 4th grade? All right? So take a careful look. Is there anyone you want me to demonstrate? I want to make sure we get through everything and we have time for your questions. Take a careful look at the list. As you can tell, I'm intensely shy and ill at ease in performing, but if you need me to demonstrate something to you. So you see, we have a fellow who comes to our school. He's a sweetheart. He's a real wise guy, but he's a sweetheart. And sometimes it's hard to understand what he says. He's too old to have this because he's in elementary school. Speech clarity. Speech clarity. So I'm going to tell you a story. All right. And one of the techniques I want you to take with you is look up something called story grammar marker. It helps organize their thinking. It will help organize their writing. It helps you adjust the level of the question to the puppies in front of you. No, I don't get any kickbacks for advertising it. All right, it just works. All right. Who? Story grammar marker. Marker. Why? Because it structures the way stories are told. Part of what children have to do is tell stories and understand stories. So if you use something that structures, I'm going to tell you a story. Who is the story about? The story is about my friend Barbara. All right? Where does Barbara live? She lives in New York City. What is she doing? She is struggling to get downtown to jury duty every day. How is she managing? She gets up very early and she takes the train. Why does she take the train? Because the train is less expensive than an Uber. Right? So when a kid gives you some pile of information, you ask him, wait a minute, honey, who are you telling me about? And what did he do? And oh, what happened? How did he feel? Where did that happen? You can start structuring because when kids have that in their heads, they can remember stories better. Memory for story details is not strong. Too much information to process. All right. This goes to what you were saying before, Mrs. Honigman. social interactions are limited, and they're not shy. They're fine, except in more demanding academic situations. And please remember my friend Dr. Tang, and take a look at the Westby scale, W-E-S-T-B-Y. The Westby scale gives you play levels, because you want to take a look at little Shlomo, who is 4 years, 9 months old, but there's something about him that's nudging you. Make sure his play skills are at his chronological age, not his developmental age. That's a big difference. My chronological age is how many years and months I've been on this earth. My developmental age is what I am able to do to what level developmental. All right? So if a person has limits of some kind, they're not going to be able to perform at their age level. They might perform at a younger level, their developmental age. Remember the story of the kids monitoring their play and seeing what they can play versus what is expected for their age. Yes?
What if they're in different situations? They're different in different situations. So they're not shy with friends, but they are shy with adults.
The first thing that comes to mind is the following. What is the nature of the interaction with the adults? Does the adult ask a lot of questions?
Probably.
You are sitting in front of an enormous number of language pathologists, all of them just like this. All right. But not with his friends. In addition to it, you know what you talk about with your friends? What you're doing, not what you know. All right? What you've eaten, where you've gone, who you're, whatever, what TV show, what game you're playing. Not higher level questions. Teachers ask you.
So that would still be a red flag.
Oh.
Maybe if they exhibit language delays when speaking to adults, but not when speaking to
Again, record and see why. I have been speaking to a colleague who is now an administrator, and I remember when I mentored him years ago in a special ed school, in a 43-minute period, this is middle school, not your crowd, that man asked 45 questions. Most of which were what? Questions. He got cured of that pretty quickly. Think of what you do to engage people. You ask questions. But with the kids, if they don't have big, again, the difference between my two sons is enormous. You could ask my son Russ a question, and he will give you an answer because he knows what you expect. You ask my son Josh a question, and he'll answer you. I don't have to tell you more than you ask me about. So there's personality as well, and temper. But be alert to what you're doing to engage that child. The language demands of 4-year-olds, of other 4-year-olds, are very different than the language demands of an adult for a child. One of the things I say to teachers, first of all, the eye contact thing, and the second thing that I say is, why in heaven's name would you walk up to a child playing with blue Play-Doh and say, oh, so what color is your Play-Doh? Honest to goodness, if the kid could and get away with it, he'd look up and say, what are you, blind? It's blue. What are you playing with? Duh. I never do that. I sit down at the table and I say, can I have some of your Play-Doh? And I don't make eye contact. I don't have it. And then I start doing things with my Play-Doh. I turn them into ducks. I turn them into marbles. And then the kids will say, hey, can I do that? Sure. And I start interacting with them. Ask a question, get an answer. Make a comment, start a conversation. Big difference. So take a look at this. How many times do I have to show you? You come in, you take your jacket off, you put it in your cubby, then can they figure out the routines and hold on to them? And pencil grip, coloring and writing skills. You're just watching that kid who is a little, always seems a step or a beat behind. Yes, maybe it's personality. Maybe it's personality, but you want to look. And here's one. I just want to make sure, we'll get to it in a minute. So, not shyness, apropos of the question. Not limited by shyness. Watch for the handwriting. And number, time, and space concepts are distorted. That's why that clock that has the red face on it is a gift. What's that called? A time timer? That allows you to see time. The visual timer. The visual timer. All right. The difficulty learning color and shape names goes to the rapid automatic naming, a major issue for children who are going to be dyslexic, who are dyslexic, and haven't manifested that yet. All right? And here's one that I want you to note. Difficulty learning nursery rhymes. One of the skills that you need to learn to read, to decode, in order to get to the part of meaning, in order to get reading, is a set of skills called phonological awareness skills. Phonological has to do with the sounds. All right? And I can spot 3-year-olds who are going to make another gray hair pop out because they can't rhyme. They don't know the songs. They don't learn the nursery rhymes. They can't rhyme. And I don't care if the rhyme is not a real word. All right? Can you give me a rhyme for jelly? And I don't care if the kid says belly because he heard the rhyme. There's no such thing as belly. And the other thing that we do, for many years I worked with the faculty at the Magen David Yeshiva in Brooklyn. And I remember the teachers looking at me askance when I started teaching the children the name dance. Because I was seeing something in some of those, no profile, I was seeing something, I'm teasing you, I was seeing something in a couple of the kids that was bothering me, which was they weren't rhyming, they were singing, and I thought, you know something, I wonder what's going on here. So I did a phonological awareness test called the name dance. You ready? The children couldn't call me Lydia, Mora Lydia. So we did the name dance. You ready? Mora, La, Lydia. All right? And then I would get up and have, now do your name. Let's do it together. Sa, La. All right? And then I would do it with somebody else. Sa, La, La. And if they could stamp out, then I knew they could syllabicate, even though they didn't know what syllabication was. And then I get a little peanut who gets up and goes, yeah. I'm happy that you are cheerful about your name, but I want you to go, okay, I can do it, Maura. Viva! And it's not because she doesn't have the motor control. So right off the bat, we start playing games with the Viva at 2 and 10 months, 3 years of age, that start tuning her ear to the syllabication. There's so many of these things that the nursery rhymes are a warning sign. And kids who can build for an hour but can't listen to a story for more than 4 minutes are telling you something. Okay? So keep an eye on those guys as well. Here's what we want. We want early, intensive intervention. He won't outgrow it. He'll just get more of it and hide it. All right? We want specific instruction. Do not underestimate how much more they're expected to know, how quickly they're supposed to know. Make no assumptions. All right? And look at what I've emboldened. No, we don't wait and see. We watch and see. And that's why I've given you all of this information. These are the things for which you can be watching. I don't gamble. I do not gamble. You can call me cheap. I don't care. I don't gamble. And heaven knows I don't gamble with a kid's future. If I'm wrong, so what? You had several hours of therapy and it cost you a bunch of money. But you may have saved his life because for 6 to 8 hours a day, for the next 18 years, that kiddo has to go to school. That's his job. And it hurts to feel rotten at your job. Now, take a quick look at these. I'm watching your time, Mrs. Twain. Be careful when you have kids with preschool identification of learning challenges of any kind. Children are not their labels. We don't say anymore, she's autistic. We say, she is a child with autism. Because everybody has a personality, has experience, has a cognitive profile, has a temperament, and an emotional makeup. All right? So be alert. The reason I picked these out is these are the most frequent diagnoses you'll see in young children. And the only person, not the pediatrician, who can not the psychologist, who can diagnose an auditory processing disorder is an audiologist in a soundproof room. I remember doing the community lecture at the Windward School and saying this because the psychologists were always writing they have an auditory processing disorder. And I made it very, very, very clear that that's not the truth. They can identify, if they know what they're doing, the way the language pathologists can, a language processing disorder, but an auditory processing disorder is a different beast. All right? What I'd like all of you to do on this side of the room for a moment, all right, is sing very quietly Happy Birthday. And on this side of the room, very quietly, sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game. All right, you know it? Okay, you ready? Very quietly, each of you, each side. Happy birthday. Now what happens if you have an auditory processing disorder, and I'm not speaking loudly enough, you have to deal with background noise. And you see what background noise does? None of you have to worry about careers in the theater. But that can only be evaluated in a soundproof room. The attention deficit disorder has to be differentiated from anxiety. Make no assumptions. There are ways to test that. There are learning disabilities and there are learning disabilities. All right. I have degrees from very good schools. All right. But the last math I ever understood, and that was barely, was algebra. I do arithmetic. I don't do math. All right. Do I have dyscalculia? No. I have an N machine. An N, oh gosh. I have my phone, calculator. My grandfather used to be able to calculate enormous volumes of numbers in his head. And one year for Hanukkah, we bought him an adding machine. And he looked at me and he said, "Thank you, sweetheart." And he puts a list of numbers on the table in front of me. He goes, "You do it on your machine." He did it faster than I did in his head. All right? So, does that make me learning disabled? No. How did I get my doctorate? This is why there are people who do this work. All right? I hired a statistician. Do I have a learning disability? There are learning disabilities and there are learning disabilities. And you have to say, who is this child? Because if two people, the two of you, you have 125 IQ and you have an 85 IQ, but you both have learning disabilities, but you have an attention deficit and you can't bear that you can't learn. Who is this child? All right, take a look at all of it. But the one that is the hardest to spot is that underlying language impairment. You can spot a person with autism. You can spot a person with a hearing loss. You can spot a person with a physical disability. You can spot a person with a cochlear implant. But a language impairment, you know, it just ain't easy. All right? And be alert to this. Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act of 1975 guarantee a free, appropriate public education to all children identified with special education needs. Please note, not everybody's mommy and daddy has the money for private intervention, but know what's happening when you're sending people off to public assessment. The definition under the law of what is appropriate and what is appropriate in my view, in your view, for your kid are not equivalent. They just simply are not. And the goal of putting children in the least restrictive environment began years and years and years ago when, all kidding aside, I went to the New York City public schools in the 50s and 60s when there was one class for the, you ready? CRMD, Children with Retarded Mental Development. That's how they were referred. And those kids were segregated. So the evolution of that over time, you have the class for the kids who are not as capable, you have the class for the kids with attentional problems, you have the class for the kids who are language impaired. The idea was not to segregate them, but to integrate them. There's a problem with the least restrictive environment is, unfortunately, not all the teachers are trained to teach all those different children's needs. So that makes a difference. And there's something else to keep in mind. The average range used to be from the 25th to the 75th percentile. It's not anymore. Depending upon the school, you can get it as low as the 9th to the 91st percentile. I often see it from the 16th to the 83rd. Well, I, as a clinician, do not teach a child at the 26th percentile the same way I teach a child at the 74th. Average range. So I want you to keep that in mind. Who is this child and what does he or she need to be able to learn? Now, one of the things that we see happen in mainstream situations is this notion of we have to modify, support, and accommodate. Here at TAL, our adaptation is to determine how the child learns and what we have to do to teach her in that way. What does she need to learn? How will she best learn it? Why does she need to be taught that way? As opposed to we're going to teach less because it's too hard for her to do. So there's diminishment. Then there is the notion of support. Here at TAL, our support orientation is a staircase. We're going to start here, and then I'm going to teach you what you need to learn and how you need to learn it so that you can get to the next step. And I'll give you a hand up to that step. And accommodate. It's too hard, you can't write, we'll let you dictate. And the kids never learn to spell. You've gotten this old and you can't decode, and it's too hard to teach you to decode when you're 12 or 14. Don't worry, you can read books on tape. The literature is becoming clearer and clearer that there are kids going to college who have never read a book. They've only listened to it. And the way I describe that all the time is the difference between an appropriate remedial environment that sees beyond the numbers is this. Would you help me, sir? I use this example all the time. Mrs. Honigan just broke her leg. And I say to her, don't worry about it. I got you. I'm going to support you. As opposed to, oh my goodness, sir, we're going to call 911, we're going to get you to the hospital for special surgery and get that leg fixed. We teach the children in the way they can be learned. And that's what we want for all kids, as opposed to modifying and accommodating so they don't have to do what they can't learn. I have, over the course of my career, seen too many kids in high school who can't read. Who can't read, all right? Now take a careful look at this. A very careful look at this. You read it. Too many kids in special ed spend a majority of their time in mainstream settings with teachers who are not trained to teach them the way they can learn. So I want you to be alert to that. I am not attacking any of your school districts. I'm attacking a well-attended federal law that doesn't see individual children. It was well-intended. And yes, there are co-teachers, but part of what we see happen is gen ed teachers, and so many of them, is the one in charge. And the special ed teacher can only support. Here, we work with the Rebam and the Moreau to teach them how to teach kids this way. I'm not advertising our school. We know who we are, but there's a big difference in how we are looking at the children. Who is this child? What does he need to learn? How must he be taught so he can learn? And why must he be taught that way? And here's why. Because that's the program that I've developed over the course of decades, and then finally, under penalty, has been beaten with a stick, beginning to write the book. Look at that face. The three words that stab me every time is, I hate school. And everybody knows that I complain about it endlessly. I travel a great distance to come here. Why? Because I love my work. I love what I can do. And a kid, I don't have to come here if I don't want to. I mean, they'll come get me, but I don't have to come here. That kid has to go to school every day. I'm almost done, Mrs. Kelly. Okay.
Right on time.
Now, for those of you who have to talk to parents, this is important. There is no question that every mother's child is the most beautiful, most handsome, most perfect, an absolute reflection of me, not his father. God knows, not his mother. And truly, and this is for everybody who knows me well knows that this is a problem for me. I am an impatient person, with one exception, children. I'm very, very patient with children. I like their company. I understand their needs. You don't necessarily want to live with me. I'm an impatient person. But patience is a virtue. Sometimes a parent has to hear it more than once. Maybe more than 12 or 24 times. Because you're scaring them. And fear, as it says, speaks very, very loudly. And we are acutely aware of a syndrome called little apple syndrome. Little apples do not fall far from trees. And when Abba has had a history, and now you're telling him that Yosef is demonstrating, it goes to the emotional part. And so there's the narcissistic insult. Patience is a virtue. All right? And what you hear, what's next is important. You know what we see Yosef doing? And we're watching, and this is how we're helping him. Because when he kicks the blocks in frustration, instead of asking for help, he unintentionally hurts someone. So we're teaching him how to ask for help, as opposed to, your child has an oppositional defiant disorder. He kicks blocks at the other children the minute he gets frustrated. No, that's a psychiatrist diagnosis. Look at the next one. Okay? Look at the next one. Poor people who are humiliated is able to. We are working on talking in full sentences with her. It's important because it makes it easier for her to be friends with the kids. Try this at home with her. Aviva, tell me who you play with and what you play. Okay? And let's all work together. We'll talk again next month. You know what? They have to think about one kid. You have to think about 23. They don't care about that. They only want you to think about him because they're scared. And then I insist. I've worked with attorneys for years and years doing expert witness testimony. Put it in writing. Because if you just say it, it didn't happen. Now look at this. You ready? Many years ago at Einstein, I was having the equivalent of a temper tantrum. I had informed this parent what needed to be done for this child. I was in my 20s, and all right, late 20s, and I thought I knew everything. And I knew what this kid needed, and I knew why he needed it. And no matter what I said, this woman looked at me as if I was from the planet Wakamaka. Couldn't get to her. And I was basically having such a hard time. And one of my colleagues, who was the most marvelous woman, I was ranting. And her name is Fran Cerullo, and Fran said to me, Lydia, come here, honey. Are you ready? And Fran was shorter, as Mrs. Caillou is, and I'm going on and on. And she says, Lydia, put your right hand on my left shoulder. Fran, what are you talking? Just, honey, put your right hand on my left shoulder. Oh my gosh. All right, now put your left hand on my right. Fran, really, could you? Lydia, honey. And she does this one. Now I'm standing in the hallway of the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, semi-hugging my colleague. And she looks at me. She was such a wonderful person. She says, now repeat after me. He's not my child. Fred, he's not my child.
He's not my child.
He's not my child.
He's not my child.
I've done everything I can as a professional.
I've done everything I can as a professional.
But he's not my child.
He's not my child.
All right?
It's been hard to say.
And I learned a lot of lessons from the folks at Einstein, but that was an important one because you don't live with that kid. All right? So here's my recommendation to you. Memorize Mrs. Cerullo's mantra. Keep calm and teach on. Gee, I wonder who thought of that one. What was his name? All right. And then to summarize Dr. Blank, one more time. The primary objective of school is to enhance cognition, knowing, meaning, and understanding. And language is critical to meeting that goal. All of school is language-based. All of it. I don't care if you're teaching bio. I don't care if you're teaching math. I've done entire courses on the language of math, which is a foreign language, replete with multiple meaning words. All right? And please, reading is language. It is a higher level language skill. It's based on oral language and oral language. We want happy, successful children in our classes. And you know what? The profession in this world that is least respected are teachers, unfortunately. And nursery school, preschool teachers who are laying the foundation for an entire academic future are entitled to low respect. But you'll earn it. You want them to be happy. You never want to hear, I hate school. And don't blink, because that's them now. All right? Good looking, aren't they? And they are, you know what? Very happy, successful people. One of them, we got early intervention for that I desired. Because I knew that he was much more than the numbers. Be alert to that. Don't blink, and remember, he's not your child. He's not your child. You're going to do the very best. We'll take any questions you have.
Neuropsychological evaluation for applicants to our school. What role do they play and how necessary are they?
There's a couple of ways to answer that question. There are teachers and there are teachers. Some teachers are gifts to children and other teachers, all you have to do is think of your favorite teacher and the teacher that you dislike the most. There are neuropsychologists and there are neuropsychologists. Some who focus on the numbers, not on the child. child is more than his numbers. So is a good neuropsych, and be alert, because not all neuropsychologists do projective testing, which is the emotional functioning part of the testing. Historically, we would send children to clinical psychologists because the neuropsychologists were interested in this, whereas the clinical psychologists were interested in the whole. We are seeing more and more neuropsychologists who are now doing projective testing, looking at the whole. What you have to remember is what you want in a document is when you have finished reading that report, you know who the child is and how he learns, as opposed to this is what he did on the test. Because I don't care what he does on the test unless I know what skills that test demanded of him and how those skills are usable as a learner. That makes a big difference. A child is more than his numbers. Do I think that a good neuropsychological evaluation is valuable? Absolutely. But if there is a hint that there is an underlying language problem in that child, you better get that kid a language evaluation as well. Because most of the psychologists are not trained to identify the incredibly complex nature of a language impairment. All right? The tests that are often used are not great representations of what the language demands are of a classroom. So the answer is yes, but. Yes.
What age would you suggest that these are effective, the neuropsych?
Some of the psychologists will say testing them before 5 is harder because of the norming. It depends on who the kid is. I would send any child under the age of 5 about whom you're going like this for a good language evaluation if you're seeing the things about which I've been talking this morning. Because I can guarantee you if that good language pathologist has given more than the most popular test, which is not a good one. Remember that the school testing is to determine eligibility. It is not diagnostic. So you want a good diagnostic evaluation, and then when the kid is 5 for the neuropsych, unless the kid is all over the place, clearly has an intentional and or emotional and or learning. What else you got, Mrs. Lydia?
I know that we're coming close to the end of time. Let's try one more question.
How do we determine when a kid can use TAL versus intervention in a mainstream school? Let's all answer that question, ladies. All right, so my colleagues are immediately no longer making eye contact. Chickens! All right. The answer to that question is the proper evaluation. If you know a child and you have been trying to teach Fady, and Fady is having trouble learning, and Fady comes across as smart, but she can't seem to always express herself clearly. She can solve a problem with blocks. She's great with the other kids, but I could stand on my head and whistle Dixie and make donations everywhere, and she cannot seem to rhyme. That's one way. We are dealing with bright children who have underlying learning disabilities, who do not have primary emotional and behavioral problems, because those kids need something different. Now, as the children get older, you sometimes see secondary emotional and behavioral problems because they go to school every day and feel crummy. All right? So the kids, think of it this way. In a place like TAL, or any of the special education schools with which I have been involved, all day, every day, in every class, the children are being taught the way they can learn. and they are being taught how they learn. Nobody's being pulled out 2 times 30 minutes. All right? No. And especially if you have an attention deficit. You get pulled out 2 times for language speech therapy in a group of 3, and 2 times for resource room, or 4 times for resource room, while things are happening in your class that you're not privy to. So when you have a kid whose needs are flagrant, when you have a kid who's clearly already beginning to be frustrated, when you have a kid that something in your kishkas is saying he needs, think of how we teach here, how we teach in all of the good special ed schools, all day, every day. This is a school with 38 children. And you know my bias by now. All the teachers are special educators, and 5 language pathologists. Because we are teaching them how to teach language impaired children. And by the way, very, very, very respectfully, that includes the band as well. So we are teaching the teachers, all of them, what to teach, how to teach it, and why this puppy needs to be taught this way, which is in part based on the program that I've developed. And I will tell you that we use the content in the service of the skills that the children need. That makes a big difference. So the answer to your question is, how many boxes are you checking on the list? And how will that child respond? And don't think we weren't aware of the challenge that some of these kids face when their 4 brothers and 3 sisters and 8 cousins went to another school and they had to come here. Not this year. Not this year. Now it's like not so different anymore. And they're doing well. And those who swore they'd never go to another school because they'd already been to 3 have made it perfectly clear. They're not coming back because they're safe. There was a question there.
I don't want to use the word outgrow because I want you to email me or whatever.
Hold on, just one minute. Where's your name tag?
Not writing my name.
Check in.
I'm trying to understand without over-diagnosing children, because I would say in a mainstream school, probably a very large percentage can check off some boxes at some point, let's say in the preschool, and I know Tal's not going to take everybody, so at certain points, again, not using the word outgrow, but to say, okay, this might be normal for this child. Let's, like you say, watch it, but some things they will move past, or they will learn, especially with exposure. Some children go home and are on their iPads or whatever it is, and they're not exposed to certain things. And then, as they mature or spend more time in school with other children that are given exposure, so they don't necessarily belong in TAL, even though they may have checked off some of those boxes at some point.
You've used 2 important words. What is your name? Can you use that?
Adina time.
I'm sorry?
Adina.
Adina, you used 2 important words. You said watch, not wait. And we'll see what happens. Let's watch. And you said some boxes. When you're checking off a lot, I bet that all the kids you have, you could check off a couple of few boxes. But when you're checking off a lot, and then you're working with this one to make it, and that box doesn't get unchecked, that's when. All right? Because I always say the same thing. He'll outgrow it when. What is it? He can't count? We'll teach him to count. He can't remember the alphabet? Who cares? All right? We'll teach him different stuff. But when you try and it doesn't get better, that's when you send them.
But you wouldn't run when you see these things to say, oh my gosh, and like the overdiagnosis. Any child that can't sit for more than 2 minutes, ADHD.
No.
You know what I mean? So
No. That's why I'm saying you're watching. You're watching. And how many boxes am I checking off? And how many of them, if I teach him in this way and he's responsive, can I erase? Watch and see. But the minute you've got a 3 or a 3.5 or a 4 who's checked virtually every box, that's a no-brainer. If half the boxes are checked, you don't get the time back. So I'd rather be safe than sorry. All right?
Yeah, but also like a lot of kids have language-based learning disabilities. Like
Yep.
that's a big piece of this too. Like when you were talking, I'm just thinking if 20% of children have dyslexia, then you're gonna have a lot of kids who are checking the boxes.
Yep. And what I want you to keep in mind is dyslexia is a language-based learning disability that is very specific. The number of pure dyslexics that you encounter is not enormous. Many children who have language impairments also have dyslexia. Many children who have dyslexia also have other language impairments. And I can tell you, I'll tell you one last story. Many, many years ago, I was consulting at the Woodward School and in White Plains, now in the city. I worked there for many, many, many years. And it was a difficult task because I would be given an assignment. Lydia, turn Figgy into a Windward teacher, which is teaching from a language, cognitive linguistic perspective education. And it was very hard for me sometimes because sometimes I couldn't. And that teacher would not be invited. You have to teach it, so we're training everybody to think a certain way and bring their background, their knowledge, and integrate it, not, okay? So one day I'm walking in the middle school with the head of the middle school, and we stopped to watch a 7th grade class. And I am listening to these children debating, and the teacher attempting to monitor, and I turned to my colleague and said, okay, I'll bite. Why are these kids here? Because clearly they were not language impaired. You know what the answer was? My colleague smiled at me and she said, those kids, Lydia, are pure dyslexics. I said, what? She goes, it happens every now and again that we get a bunch that come together. She said, you ready? She said, and every last one of them faked it until they were in the 5th grade. I was dumbstruck. They're not language impaired, they were pure dyslexics. That sound symbol correspondence. One of the little boys in this school has been beside himself that I could not recite the entire hour of days. He has been instructing me at lunch, giving me homework, and grading it. I'm learning. But these kids, bright, bright kids, couldn't decode. Couldn't decode. Right? So keep that in mind. Dyslexia is a language-based learning disability. It is often accompanied by attentional problems, language problems, etc., etc. Pure dyslexics are a different breed. Doesn't mean they don't need this school. We got a couple of them floating around here. All right? Thank you so much. Use this information.